Good morning and welcome to another episode of Raise the Bar. My name is Troy Haynes of Sky High and Fly Jump Camps, and we have a guest today from across the pond from England. So we're waiting on Harry Lewis. He's a 21-year-old student, and I think I've been talking with Harry for a couple of years now. But he's a young kid who is continuing to get better every time I talk to him. He's gone through a couple of trials here and there. And I'm typing into the chat, let's go. So he should be checking in. I believe I've done a couple of posts with Harry. I can't follow back that far in the chain. I'm sure it's been a couple years, but we're going to find out about what's been going on with Harry in his life. So just recently here on Raise the Bar, we've had a lot of coaches and trainers, and then we've had a few athletes here and there. I'm a little bit farther ahead on YouTube than we are on the Apple podcast. So we are getting ready for an exciting new chapter of opening up the podcast to more listeners through my website and some other things that are going on. So those will be details will be coming forth shortly. I'm still trying to get Mike Powell to come on to the podcast. He's a busy man. I almost never saw him when we were teammates at UCLA, and he went on to much greater fame and accomplishments, and has always been kind of on the run doing a million things at once. So if I can never get him to slow down and take an hour out of his busy day to spend with us, we'll have a former Bruin, and you know how much I like having those on, and also a former world champion and current world record holder in the long jump. But what most of you don't know about Mike is that he was also a very good high jumper in high school when we were competing over here. When he was a senior, I think I was a junior, and I'm pretty sure he was jumping at least 6'10" or 7 feet in high school. And I don't know how hard he worked on it, because the only meet that I remember with Mike was at Arcadia. I'm sure we would have been at CIF finals together too, but he walked up to me and asked me, "Hey, is this your mark?" And I'm looking at my piece of tape on the ground in the grass, and I was like, yeah, that's my mark." And he goes, "Well, that's good, man." And he stands on it and started running towards the bar and just ran up and took a jump. And I don't even remember where it was at, probably 6'4", 6'6" or something. And say meter 95. And I've been getting criticized for talking in in feet and inches on my Instagram. So anyway, he pops over that and says, "Hey, thanks," and goes running off. And I was like, okay, well, I guess that's his mark. And so he was just obviously incredibly talented. And we ended up jumping together at UCLA both of our senior years. He lost a year of eligibility when he transferred from UCI, California Irvine. And anyway, we got to jump a bunch of times together, and he never worked on it ever. He was always working on long jump and triple and sprinting and all kinds of other stuff, where he was scoring points for that team. That both of our senior years, we went to nationals at UCLA as a team and came in 8th. And then very next year, when we both graduated, they won their last NC2A title. So terrible timing for both of us. But it's the way that stuff works out. All
You
right.
can hear me?
There you are. There you are. So it says Harry Wiley. How did we get Harry Lewis?
Okay, Wiley is my. Do you want me to hop back out and hop back in so it says Harry Lewis like my Instagram? Because
No,
Wiley's technically.
yeah, I think you're good.
Okay, yeah. Wiley's my is my real last name, but Lewis is my middle name, and it's what I'll be going forward in the future with. It's just Wiley's kind of like what I was born with.
Okay. Yeah, that's part of being famous, right? You pick
Yeah.
your name. I know there's a over here, I don't know if it's the same in Britain, but there's a lot of actors and people that get up and sing and all that don't like their real names, obviously, so they'll change them.
Yeah,
Or they'll
like
say,
Elton John, like Elton John.
right, I don't like my middle name, or I don't, I like my middle name better than my first name, or whatever. But yeah, it's actors especially. But well,
For
hey,
sure, for sure.
Harry, we got you all the way here. So it's 5 o'clock over there. Is that right?
Yeah, 10 past 5.
10 past 5. Awesome. So I opened up. I'm gonna have to do a little bit of chopping in the cutting room because I was talking to a black screen. But so if you just joined us, we're here on Raise the Bar, and our guest is the young Mr. Lewis, Harry Lewis. It's his middle name, and I just lost it again. Wiley, from all the way from across the pond. And now you're in England,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
roughly. I know it's a bigger place. I think, I don't know, when I was a kid, for some reason I always thought of, even though it's Great Britain, in my head England was this little place across the pond, and when you look at it, it's pretty big. You guys got
Yeah,
a lot of
it's,
stuff
it's
going.
like a state size, like a state size.
Yeah. So why don't you give us a little background, Harry? I told everybody that you'd been jumping for a little while, and I was trying to follow back on our chat between the two of us. It's been a
Yeah, yeah,
couple
yeah.
years, right, since I first saw you jump. And did I ever do a
Yeah,
post of you jumping? Because
yeah. I think maybe back in COVID when I jumped, I was probably about 18, jumped 201 for the first
Mhm.
time. So 6'6", maybe 6'7" for the first time, for the American listeners. And I would have been, 18, and I would have been coming back from obviously that massive turmoil. That, like, the COVID season was one of those ones where I had 2 outdoor competitions, and it was like, okay, I've got to get myself up to top speed, or this season's not even going to be like one for the record books. But
yeah, there was a
yeah,
it was a grim period in human history for sure.
yeah, for real.
I had a couple of athletes that I was training that were I had one kid who made it to the state finals here in California as a junior, and he came back, and we started really training in earnest his senior year. And the very first meet we had was like literally, I mean, 3 or 4 days before the pandemic hit. So he jumped 209, I think. So he was 6'10, right around there, and was the number one jumper in California and the nation. And then the
Damn.
pandemic hit the next week. So no state meet, no nothing, no meets, no season.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's how it really felt for me as well. We had in the UK we have a short indoors, and typically I do okay indoors, but normally outdoors is where I get like slightly longer, and I like the warmth, and then I start doing better. I've always PB'd outdoors,
Hmm.
and yeah, I just felt like it came to March time in the UK. I think March was when we really started locking down, and then we were literally being told by our governing body, UK Athletics, are prepared to not have a season because we don't even think by September it'll be fine. And we're like, really? And then we were back at track in about the end of June. But then June, July, August, and you know what? Well, if you know what the UK weather's like, it's probably more accustomed to like a Northern American state, like probably more like the Northeast American states. It's rainy. We can have days where it's 35 degrees.
Hmm.
I don't know what that is in yours, but we can have
Oh
days where
yeah.
it's like really, really hot, almost 40 degrees. That's very rare.
Yeah.
Then the average summer day in the UK is probably 18 degrees and cloudy. So
Right.
jumping
Yeah.
jumping conditions sometimes can be hampered by conditions even in the middle of our summer. So
Wow. Yeah. I was talking with Barbara Bachaka, my Canadian gal jumper,
yeah,
and
yeah, yeah.
she was telling me, we're so spoiled. She loves coming here to jump because, there's a song over here that says it never rains in Southern California. It's like, I mean, it does, but it's very infrequent. I mean, inside, I think a rainy year, I would say maybe 10 or 15 days of rain. That would be a lot. Like if you think back on it for us, so
Yeah,
it's
that's incredible.
it's
I
basically
think
it's a desert. We've got the ocean on one side, and it's the state is technically a desert, although there are places that are more more grassy and more rainy, especially as you get up north in California. But yeah. So anyway, the wonders of indoors. That's one thing we've been talking about over here too. Like in Southern California, again, when I grew up as a kid, there's no need for any indoor training of any kind because it's like you can always be
all the way
outside.
through.
So they had some indoor meets for us, One was the Sunkissed Invitational, which is long since gone. That was back in the early 80s. So I was a senior in high school. I got invited to go to that, and I just finished playing football. So I'd broken my hand. It was in a soft cast, and I just recovered from that. So I'd just gotten it off, and I was terribly out of shape. And then we get inside, and it was wood. So the surface was wood, and it was really tight. There's no room. So it was like the standards and maybe about 15 feet. And my approach was 20 feet wide. I had a really wide approach. I got laughed at by my teammates at UCLA when I got there. They're like, "What are you doing out there?" I'm like, I don't know. I'm just jumping. So I had no room. I was really cramped, and it was on wood. So it felt like your spikes were sinking into the ground and you couldn't pull your feet out. It was like walking through mud, or something.
Yeah, I can imagine. I can imagine. That's weird.
Super slow, out of shape, too tight. I mean, it was just a nightmare. I think I no-hided it at, $1.95 or something like that. And I was just like, what? So that was bad. And then maybe 5 or 6 years later, I got in after I'd left college. I trained really hard to get into an indoor meet, jumped like 220 to get into this thing. And it was the same experience all over again. I hated it. I was just like, why did I work so hard to get here? I hate indoors. I don't understand what the attraction is. So unfortunately, I was out here. I've heard that there's a lot of really nice facilities at other places. I just haven't seen any. So it's
in the UK, we probably got like I'd say 10 really good operational indoors. Like we've got Glasgow, London, Manchester, like Lee Valley. We even have stuff. We even have like just indoor straights where they'll pull a high jump bed onto the indoor straight, and well, the one that we have in Nottingham, it doesn't do the job. But luckily, I've got Loughborough around the corner, and well, I don't know what the US's best indoor or just in general training facility is, but our Loughborough University is like a UCLA or like one of the top universities.
Cool.
And that's where I do most of my indoor training sometimes.
So one thing that keeps coming up with me, Harry, and you're the probably about the fifth person from across the pond. I keep saying I've had the kid from Norway, the decathlete, he was on, and I've had Rosie Sharples. She's I think she's Scottish. I'll probably screw all these up. The names and faces and places are all just so. But it's different over there. I've talked and asked about background and what is it like as a kid growing up over there, because over here we've got, like you said, it never rains, so we're outside all the time and we're playing whatever's in season. Right now, like it's football season here in America, so it's football. We've got women's volleyball, we've got basketball is getting ready to go in the winter, soccer is getting ready to go in the winter. Everything's kind of seasonal. Track doesn't really happen here at all for us. There's virtually no indoors when we're growing up. Now for the kids back east, it's the weather starts getting worse earlier, so they start getting kicked indoors and they have to do it. So there's more indoor activity, I would say, from the Rockies going east just due to weather, but really not much of an indoor. And then our outdoor seasons in the spring. So I was always doing whatever was up. Baseball is a spring and summer, so excuse me. And it's just, we did whatever it was, and it was loosely organized. But we go from junior high to high school to college, and then if you're elite, you can keep going, and you can be elite while you're in college. There's one thing Barb and I were talking about the other day. She's like, once you get to in my senior year, once I was done at UCLA, I didn't even know what to do next, as far as continuing my career, like finding meets and all that stuff. I was very fortunate. UCLA was great. If I did need a meet, they would always let their alumni come and jump, during the current season. So I could get a place to jump if I really needed one, to get a mark for something. But it's very hazy, very, not communicated well to athletes. And unless somebody's pursuing you because you're so good, like if you're right on the precipice of maybe becoming good, it's almost like everything just goes away. There's nothing that's super well organized. So how does it start with you guys from the roots up? Like, how did you get started, and how is it going, and where are you going?
So like literally off the bat, like coming out of your version of kindergarten, we just call reception. So
Hmm.
out of the bat reception, loved running, loved playing just any sport I could basically do as long as it got me kind of out the classroom.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd literally just do anything and everything I could. And I think the thing that I really, really first kicked off with was I did martial arts. So I did karate.
Awesome.
I did karate until I was about 14, interspersed with playing football, because obviously that's the big thing here. So that's obviously soccer for you, but the real
Right.
football was
Right.
that's how we see it, kind of thing. And
Right.
yeah, I was everything I've ever kind of tried to put my mind to, I've been very good at. And football was one of those ones where maybe if certain things had happened and if my right foot was maybe as good as my left foot, I'd have
Yeah.
probably been able to pursue that, because there's a lot of money in it, especially in the UK, and in
Okay.
Europe there's a lot of money in it. But
Yeah.
it was one of those ones where I guess me being quite stretchy, and there's a lot of plyometrics involved in karate.
Right.
One thing, I was already at the athletics club because I was doing well at sport, and my PE teachers had noticed me, and basically it helped that my dad was an athlete back in the past. So he kind of like pushed me down the line, but he ran 10.9, but it's not like I mean, most people I know who are good athletes can run 10.9. So, but back in the day, I used to think, yeah, my dad's an athlete, I can be an athlete too, kind of thing. And I don't know, you just kind of find, I'm not particularly tall for a high jumper, but you just find you're good at what you're good at. And I guess like sand in a sieve, sometimes you might get something good. You know what I mean? There
Right.
might be a golden nugget every now and then, and
Right.
maybe my sports throughout. I mean, in the UK, nobody gives a crap about high jump. I don't know if I can swear.
Yeah.
nobody, no, no, nobody cares about athletics really, and apart from the people who do. And then we turn up for the events, like when you see, like, was it the London Diamond League this year? And then all of a sudden you've got 60,000 people in the stadium. It's like, okay, where's all this support for the local stuff, or
Yeah.
even our national final? I'm looking at London, and we filled the Olympic Stadium, and I'm thinking, and then when we get our national final at Manchester, and there's about 3,000 people in the stadium, it's like, what
Yeah.
happened there? But yeah, in the UK, you're basically, even at secondary school, we're pushed down. You play football, or you play rugby, or you play cricket, because they're English summertime sports.
Yeah.
And obviously, we're mad for cricket over here, and I love it, but I love it for different reasons than wanting to play it. And
Right.
then
Right.
rugby again is another one where you have to be probably physically gifted to play that,
Yeah.
especially at the top end. You've got to be 6'4", 6'5" to be anything good in rugby, or
Those guys are
rapid,
huge.
or
Yeah.
absolutely explosive. So
Yeah.
I guess for me, yeah, it's, you find yourself in sport, and I think high jump found me. Maybe when I was looking for something, but I don't know. It's I've done it since I was probably 14, but properly since I was about 16. I'm now just 21, so but it's weird. I say I'm 21 and I smile to myself, because I really still don't feel 21. I don't know if that's the pandemic, or
Right.
the fact that I've had a couple of seasons where actually I haven't been taking it super seriously, in the sense of it's not been super serious for not me wanting to take it seriously, but for either medical reasons or getting through university and making sure that's correct, and
Right.
supporting myself for the next couple of steps, to the point where I feel like now I can take it super seriously. I still don't really feel like, since when I was 17, jumping 6'7", I still don't really feel like I've changed all that much. And maybe
Hmm.
that's me being naive and young, but I still feel like very, very, even when people say, oh yeah, you're 21, and I see 21-year-olds and they're at the Olympics and they're killing it, I'm thinking, yeah, maybe my development plan's slightly different, and I've just got to
Right.
let
Right.
you know what I mean? I've got to let things kind of muster and grow in the right direction. But yeah,
Yeah.
that's
So
pretty much the bottom to the top for me.
right when as you're going along, did the facilities change, like from place to place as you're going to different schools? And then did you find yourself with some good coaching, or have you been working with yourself?
Yeah,
How
yeah,
does it go?
yeah. So I'd say primary school, secondary school. So that's what you would say, junior school and middle school.
Hmm.
Um, absolutely nothing. Like you may as well be jumping in the 1970s.
Right.
I mean, a crash mat, the yoga mats kind of that
Yeah.
thick, and maybe five of them stacked up, and they're saying, "Yeah, we're not flopping today, we're
Yeah.
scissoring."
Yeah.
And yeah, I used to be really good at karate to the point where I got a black belt at like 13, 14. So
Hmm.
plyometrically, doing kicks and stuff, I already knew I was springy.
Right.
We got to a sports day one year. I was scissoring because that's all we did at school, and I competed against other schools and won scissoring, and I was smaller than everyone.
Hmm.
And nothing really happened, but I was already at an athletics club, and our athletics club's really decent. To be fair, like in England, we've got a proper high jump bed. It's Nerf. Is it NEUFF? It's a proper like
Mm.
big size bed, good uprights, and a good track surface. So I always had the base standard what you need to jump well.
Right.
From about the age of 13, 14, even into 15, I really just had a coach who might turn up and might know how to high jump, but it could just be someone from the club. And then about the winter after I would have been 16, or coming into being 16, just almost a little bit like a lot of people say, like a coach just appears and then they're there for the long run. And my coach has been with me for the now 5 years, and we're going into our sixth full year
Hmm.
next season. And he's basically took pretty much since meeting me, he's pretty much took me from about 1 meter 60. So what's that, like 5 foot flat, nearly, maybe something like
Yeah.
that.
See, 150 is 4'11". So 155
Yeah,
is
yeah,
5'1". 160 would be like 5'3". Yeah.
yeah. So pretty much from about the age of 15, 16, I would have been very good at school level and almost like too good for my own school and even local school meets.
Right.
And then I went to this thing which was like in the UK. I don't know how to describe districts to you, but it would have been like your state final kind of thing. So the
Okay.
next time you go to the big thing,
Yeah.
and I remember this kid jumping like 186 next to me, so what, 6'1", and I was jumping still 160 or 165, and thinking,
Yeah.
damn, okay, this is the next level. But yeah, my coach turned up, and he's called Adam Galley, and he kind of just from the get go, I was on like a 10 stride run up back then. He took me down to 3 strides and was
Hmm.
basically like, look, we're going to learn a run, we're going to learn a jump. We took it very slow, and by the end of that year, I went from I think 160 to 181. So I got myself up to that mark, which I
Wow.
was thinking
Awesome.
was pretty big in the first place. But yeah,
Okay.
so
Well, go ahead. Finish your thought.
no, and then pretty much since then, my coach has been we're connected to both Nottinghamshire unis, which is one of the unis I'm at, and then we pick up quite a lot of talent through that system, or we develop quite a lot of talent in Nottingham. And I mean, it's almost like I think with high jump, there's probably lots of kids out there who are very talented at high jump and have never high jumped, or and
Right.
never will high jump, to the point where we find people who are like 13 years old and they're like 5'4", and then 2 years later they're a girl and they're like 15 and nearly 6 foot, and it's like if we'd have never have helped you
Right.
find the way in high jump, you'd have been someone slipped through the cracks,
Yeah.
and then all of a sudden they're at national standard, and they almost have the same kind of high jump mindset that I had when I was 16. It's like I think finding that talent and almost just giving them that base to spring from is
Hmm.
it's kind of what my coach gave to me, and I'm kind of trying to help the youth generation at my club do that as well. So, but
Awesome.
yeah,
So you're already kind of a coach mentality. That's cool. I didn't realize
part time.
I did not know I was going to be a coach. That was the funniest thing. I really, really wanted to, jump high and get into the Olympics. When I was a kid, I was watching, Dwight Stones from the US, in 77, 76 at Montreal. He was just a brash, young American, cocky world record holder, and he never quite got over the hump at the Olympics. But we all knew who he was and we all wanted to be just like him, and the
Yeah,
Olympics to me was always just like this huge, and it's a huge spectacle. And, but it's still, even though I, as a kid, I grew up watching, Bruce Jenner, who won the decathlon in 76. he was like
Yeah.
the pinnacle. He wins a gold medal, and I probably broke the world record at that time. And I don't remember, but then he was on Wheaties boxes over here, and making all these commercials and everything. And as a kid, you're just like, wow, that would be great. And once you pursue that along, that was cool. But I always had my eggs in that basket. I did not think coaching. And even though once I graduated from UCLA, I took a year off to train for the trials in 88. And then I actually went back and finished after I didn't even make it to the trials that year. I had a good year, but I never even made the trial height. So then I went back to school, got my degree, and then I'm just kind of lazing about the house like everybody else. It was just like the graduate. My mom's like, what are you gonna do? You need to get a job. You can't live here forever. I was like, okay. So I went and started coaching, but I still didn't see myself as a coach. Even for the first 5 or 6 years, I was still training. I was still trying to compete, and it was a weird transition. Now it's like I almost don't remember. I mean, I do remember, and I get really fired up when I see you jump well. I see anybody else jump well. I love the two letters PB. It used to be PR,
Yeah.
personal record. Now it's personal best. I love hearing about those. I always want to show everybody, your next PB jump. Like, what have you personal best since the last time we talked? Okay, send me the video. I'll put it out there so everybody can see it, because it's just one of those awesome feelings, and you can't describe to anybody. And then, yeah, the transition was weird, but so you're already doing that. I had a question popped into my head real quick, Harry. You mentioned that you did martial arts, and I'm
Yeah.
thinking back in my own development. I was always once I got to be third or fourth grade, I remember being kind of athletic, nothing outstanding, but not bad either. But then, I remember I was getting picked on by some of the, bullies and stuff like that. Told my mom, I'm getting picked on. I was an only kid, so I didn't know how to fight for myself. So I never had to fight with my brothers or anything. And she sent me to take karate lessons. So I took kung fu from a friend of the family's who was a black belt, and he was really good teacher and everything. So I started learning, because we stretched, right? We did flexibility stuff, which you don't
Yeah.
usually do when you're a kid. You're just running around. And of course, this is in the 70s, so nobody even knew and stretching was important back then. Or if they did, they didn't preach it. So we did flexibility, and like you said, we're doing kicks, and you're balancing on one foot, and you're striking at targets, and with both your hands and your feet. And I just think it's one of the greatest training grounds ever as far as developmentally. I would put it right there with like ballet, because like when you do a kata, like just a
Yeah.
standing
Yeah.
ritual, block, step back, sweep, block, punch, kick. I was like, okay, so this has got movement and coordination, and then when you're sparring, you're trying to hit a moving target, and it was just like, it was fantastic, and I remember thinking when I got done with that, not knowing, but I definitely stepped up like a couple levels because of it. And you
Yeah.
mentioned that, and
100%,
I
100%.
would just say, I remember when I was a kid hearing, of course, about all the Russians. You hear about the Russians, they go, oh, they make all their kids take ballet. And at the time, I remember thinking, ballet, right? And then
Yeah.
when you really watch what they do in ballet, you're like, oh my gosh, that could be really, really beneficial. It's super flexible and, very powerful jumping. And
Stability.
yeah, so I'm thinking of revolutionizing all this training, because over here now, and I see it all the time on our feeds on Instagram, right? It's all speed, agility, fast feet, plyos, explosive power, all this other stuff. And you're like, I don't know if kids are ready for all that stuff that early. Maybe not as much, maybe a little bit would be okay, but I would be like, man, let's get them into a martial art. I don't care if it's kung fu, I don't care if it's karate, I don't care if it's jujitsu, whatever, taekwondo. Get them going in that, and then maybe it'd be a hard sell for a lot of kids, but dance/ballet would, I
Oh
still
yeah.
be really beneficial.
I really do believe that like the good core athletes that I know, especially in the UK when it seems to be coming to the jumps events, especially even like pole vault. Like I say, I've got one of my mates. He's English. He's from Nottingham, and he pole vaults 525. So I guess is that like over 17 feet
Yeah,
maybe.
yeah,
Quite a bit over 17 feet maybe. And he's in Kansas training out there in Fort Hayes, and he had a gymnastics background and I had a karate background.
Right.
But then when we went to go do some certain training together in Loughborough, and we were doing like like the gymnastics, they're like these walls that have the wooden rungs all the way up them.
Mm-hmm.
And we're both very adept at like stretching and using them for pull-ups, and you could see that there was a cross compatibility of what he'd learned in gymnastics. I mean, it was very strenuous. He used to tell me that his gymnastics, because gymnastics coaches, especially in the UK, even in the last 10 years, almost were militant with their level of training. And what's quite crazy is my karate was like quite a Midland. I don't know if you know the term Midland. So we have Southern region, Midland region, and then like a Northern region. And the three regions are kind of they're kind of like what a lot of our athletics is actually like broken down into. That's how we do our championships before nationals.
Okay.
And I'd say like this karate school was like a proper Midland level school. So it wasn't like you said you learned from a friend, and it was like quite a small school. This was quite like, maybe you have like 50 kids in a room at one time, and then you'd go to the big league and it'd be like 150, maybe 200 kids in a room. And you basically all competing against each other we'd be ranked out of like 6 or something, and every kid would get a score, and every week you'd be competitive. So I think maybe the nature, actually, like if I'd have been slightly less competitive at a younger age, or if I hadn't been as competitive and I hadn't had that experience of like you say, even the training level that we used to do in karate, like I genuinely don't think that I'd have the same passion towards athletics now if I hadn't have almost developed that hunger and kind of desire from even something else. So maybe like you said, it could be, there are a lot of cross-compatible skills. And every time I do something in high jump, sometimes I'll do something completely new in my high jumping and I'll be like, oh, wow, that feels like something I've done in karate before.
Right.
Like even if it's like breaking down like as little as just like tiny drills, and then it's the movement pattern or it's that. But maybe it's also the mentality that you get as a youngster doing another sport. And then the only reason I didn't do karate was it wasn't an Olympic sport in 2012. But in 2012, I'd have been a 10-year-old karate student, nearly getting my black belt, one of the youngest in my area, and would have been more likely to have, if I'd have carried on pushing from there, more likely to have gone to probably I genuinely believe if British karate had have been gearing themselves up for Tokyo 2020 or 2021, as it turned out to be, as early as Beijing or London, I think then I would have never have left karate, and I think I would have been very, very likely, if I'd have stayed healthy, potentially pushing to go to karate Olympics, and not look to diversify myself, because London 2012 came around. I'd have been 10 years old. I'd have been absolutely blown away by how amazing the Olympics was, and I was like, I need to do something that gets me to the Olympics, and karate just wasn't that sport. So I think for me, I think early on, if you can get if it's your child or there is a child at your club and you can notice them, maybe if I notice a lot, maybe if they're doing something like football or rugby in the UK, then they have tendencies that maybe aren't as good for maybe some athletic events, but they're better for some other athletic events. So like I see like a lot of our rugby lads are good at sprinting just because they're bigger and stronger and musclier than everyone else early on. And maybe I think that there's an argument that maybe it's almost like the kids that do well at the sports like athletics, it might not always be their first choice. I bet for you it wasn't your first choice. I bet it's one of those ones where you find your path. And I don't know how high jump was like your pick, but I definitely know for me it was kind of like, well, I was good at one thing and then it was the next best thing that I almost felt like I could achieve at. Do you know what I mean? So
yeah.
And then my last point. Now to think of it as anything else but my sport, I wouldn't be able to. Like, I went into high jump thinking we'll give this a go, and now as a high jumper, it's like, no, I am definitely a high jumper. I was always meant to be a high jumper, but it's probably naive to think that.
It's funny because we're verging onto talent, and then how do you recognize talent? So when we were kids, it started around 4th or 5th grade. All of a sudden I just noticed I could jump every kind of jump, like standing, broad jump, whatever jump we were doing and we had competitions at school, I would win and I could beat the guys that were older, and it just kind of stayed that way. I started high jump at 6th grade, whatever the local meets were, I won 2 of those my 7th grade year. And I remember my heights because they were always higher than I was tall. So I could always jump over my own head. So like you said, I was having success at doing that. I liked basketball. I liked volleyball. I could always jump up and grab stuff or hit it or whatever. So those were natural sports. But I went out for basketball my sophomore year, didn't get along great with the coach. And that was it for my basketball career. It was like there was no other, I wasn't that in love with it. I would have liked to have played it. I used to shoot in my own front yard in the basket and all that, but it was never like the passion of it. And I'd always been good at the jumping stuff. So yeah, I loved football though. Football was my first American football over here. I wanted to play football. So I'm a 49er fan, and I was born and raised in San Francisco. So
yeah, makes
Niners
sense.
since birth. And I've watched the great 49er football teams, and I was like, oh my God. I think in 6th grade when they asked, what do you want to be? I wrote down, I want to play football for the 49ers, So that didn't happen. I tried it through high school and, it was all right and everything. But then it became obvious that I was better at, jumping than I was at running around and hitting people. So then I just pursued that at UCLA and, went from there. But I keep thinking about, our recruitment process now. If you and I were running some, camp somewhere or, like you said, whatever the club that you're talking about over there by you, where you get the locals, right? That was one thing. It was Abraham Vogelsang from Norway, the decathlete. And we were talking about that. And he was talking about how it's all localized. Like you just join the local athletic club, right? So
Yeah,
that's how you get started. And then they're all interconnected loosely and you start to figure things out. And it's kind of like that over here at the grassroots level. But most of the time when I first start seeing kids, there's parents that throw their kids into the youth level meets when they're really young and they're just running around like crazy, because they're just kids and they're having fun. And you'll probably spot some talent here and there, I'm sure. And then there's a junior Olympics. And then they get to junior high is like this wasteland. There's nothing over here. Like you're saying for us, 7th grade, 6th, 7th, 8th grade, 9th grade, depending on the school, somewhere through there, when you're getting up towards 14, between 10 and 14 is a wasteland because most junior highs don't have a track. They don't even have a track.
Exactly
they don't have any coaches. Yeah. It's not organized, blah.
Yeah.
So I'm always looking for these kids and they come out and the parents go, yeah, my son tried the high jump last year and, or my daughter tried the high jump, and they just threw them into it because they're at a meet and they're going to hold the event and they might have 1 or 2. They don't even know who they are. So then the coach will go, hey, you're pretty tall. Why don't you go try the high jump? And they'll do it. And like you said, all of a sudden they have a little success. Maybe they won first time they ever tried it and they're like pretty bouncy. Mm-hmm. And I'll get these parents that call up and go, yeah, my daughter just tried it last year and she had some success and we don't really have a coach. I'm like, I can't even tell you how many times I'm just like, hey, we don't really have a coach because they're coming to me, and I'm like, okay, yeah, I've been around the block a few times. I think I can help you. So, we go from there, but I get those, but that's not even really recruitment. That's just, they come to you. And then it's like, where do you build it from? Right. What I'm looking for, I prefer is basketball players, because basketball players have good agility. Basketball training is almost perfect for high jump because all they do is short sprints. Like, if you might get a breakaway and run 40 feet full speed. Other than that, it's like quick darting movement. So you're always working on agility, acceleration. You've got to be able to learn how to run and jump off 1 foot to do a layup. So if you can do a running layup, you can probably learn how to jump off 1 foot. Everybody has their preferred foot. Like if I was going to do a layup, I always jump off my left foot. It doesn't matter which side I'm coming from. I can come from the basket from the right, like I do when I'm jumping, and I can go front side. I can reverse. I'm like, I can do whatever I want from there. That's how I learned how to tomahawk reverse dunk. It's the same thing. And it's like, but if I come from the other side, I don't switch feet and go off my right. I would go off my left, but it's basketball is perfect. Volleyball, not as good because how do they jump most of the time? 2 feet. And you'll catch those kids run up and you tell them they got to jump off 1 and they'll put the first foot on the ground. All of a sudden that second foot goes down and they jump up and I'm like, volleyballer? And they're like, yep. I'm like, no, you can't do that here. So anyway,
That's very interesting that you spoke about high jump and volleyball, because I've got two youngsters who are at my club. They're 17 and 14, and the 17-year-old is a volleyballer. He plays for England international volleyball,
Hmm.
and he came to us and he's like, I can jump. I've jumped 170 at my school. He goes to like what we'd call a private school, and they kind of give him a bit more heads up and facility that a normal school in the UK would give.
Right.
Um, he jumped 187, so what, 6'2" and a bit to end the year, and very, very close to 190, which is what, like nearly 6'3".
Hmm.
And the other lad who's 14, he's called Tejan, and he literally came out of nowhere in his J's, you can imagine, his Jordan basketball boots, runs
Right.
up to the bar, just like absolutely never. Me and my coach have never seen anything like this in 5, 6 years of being a team, like coaching and then just me being the athlete. Bars at like 70, and like you could have put like, I don't know, you could have put his whole body underneath him maybe twice. And I'm like, damn, this guy's 14 years old. And then the bar gets to, I think, 81, 83 in his first session. And it's like, okay, this kid is something else. And
Mm.
he, like, if we'd have had an official competition that night and we'd let him jump, I lent him a pair of my spikes just because he's my size at 14. So I was
Yeah.
like, stick these on, jump in them. And he cleared what would make him like our UK #1 at his age group first.
Wow.
And he literally, I was like, what do you do outside of school? And he's like, well, I've been watching, all these basketball workouts, how to make it to the NBA, how to increase your vertical. He's like, I'm trying to increase my vertical to 40 inches. I'm like, he's telling me about plyometric training, and
Right.
I'm thinking this guy's only just turned 14. He's like
Yeah.
5 foot, and he's quick. He's naturally strong. Like most 14-year-olds, he speaks like a 14-year-old. You can see he looks like a 14-year-old,
Yeah.
and his body's just so far advanced from that. And
Yeah.
he can't almost tell me why he's so good, because he doesn't know, but he is,
Yeah.
because he built himself. He said he bought like a tire to train with, and he's been doing like the hopping in and out and the drills and throwing it
Hmm.
about. And he doesn't realize, but he probably made himself one of the most elite junior high jumpers in the
Yeah.
UK just because he wanted to play basketball so badly.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Well,
we're very, very excited about both of those two, because they're both pushing each other, and we've got like almost a link back to your previous comment. Like, we have local clubs, and all the local clubs compete in something that we call a YDL, which is a youth development league, and
mhm.
that's all over. We've got that across the whole of the UK. And then there's also a Midland League, which is like the best teams in the Midlands, or the best team in the Southern Leagues, or the best team in the Northern Leagues. They all compete against each other. And then there's also a league above that, which we call NAL, which is National Athletics League. And then that's like 5 divisions big. And it's basically every team from the top of Scotland all the way down to Cornwall. Like the very, very, if you're a team, you'll find your way in what division you are. And I mean,
Right.
division 3 or 4, you're going to get very, very sparse and average, and maybe what you would call like middle school results. But then NAL Senior, which is like the Premiership division, which my club's in, the high jump could be won in 220, the 225, I think we had last
Wow.
year. The pole vault could be like 540, 550. Long jump could
Yeah.
be like 780. And it becomes, NAL is almost like, you don't have to be English. So like some clubs will bring in people from, if they're at university, and let's say they're like Spanish or French or Portuguese.
Hmm.
So it's like a good mix. And actually, like some of our NAL level it's good enough quality to probably get itself on one of these, like we call them, is it like Continental Bronze Tour? But it doesn't kind of get that standard, maybe because there's politics in England athletics
Right.
and youth athletics, which, in my opinion, as a youngster, seems to hold us back. But that's a whole other story.
Right.
But
Right. Everybody's got those. Yeah. We talk about that all the time over here too. So
yeah, but no, you carry on.
no, you go.
Yeah, so linking back to both Tejan and the volleyball player, they really, really, really do compete against each other almost every training session, because we have that Midland League spot, which is for anyone from 14 to You could be 40 and still competing if you wanted
Right,
to.
right.
So they know they're going to get their YDL spot, but they know the competition is not going to be as good because it's all the kids. They
Right.
know they can try and fight for a Midland League spot, but they know one of the spots is going to be taken by me.
Yeah.
So they have to fight each other to try and then they know NAL is going to be the best competition for them to try and show their skills there.
Yeah.
But they know they've got to get past me at least for one of the spots. And the likelihood of that is they're not unless I'm away for some reason.
Yeah.
And that level of competition that I guess we have in the UK there isn't a lot to fight for, especially when you, like you say, 14. There's no nationals at 14. There's no, I think at 15, under what we call under 15s, under 16s, that's when it starts to all kick off.
Yeah.
So what you say is very similar to kind of, we'll have good sports days and you'll always be like, oh, you're a really good athlete. And you'll have like a lot of people saying you're talented at 10 to 14. But you don't really know how talented you are until you get to that first like state meet, as you would call it.
Right.
And then there's a lot of kids who go, oh my God, I got beat so badly that I'm never coming back. And actually, maybe that's a problem that we've got with our system that seems like it's a little bit similar to yours.
So I was wondering about that because, it's first time, we don't really talk about this much on Raise the Bar, but I went through I would call it a desert period. But when I got done competing in 92, I was 28 years old. I tried for my last Olympic trials over here, didn't make it. And I'm like, I'm 28 years old. I gotta start getting a job. I was working odd jobs, trying to train, all that stuff. And I'm like, okay, I finally got to settle down. I mean, Barb and I were talking about that the other day. She goes, well, that's not really your peak, is it? Like at 28, did you feel like you're getting old? And I go, yeah, somewhat. And I was stagnant because my best jump was when I was 22. I was in 1986. And I hadn't gotten any better in 6 years. I was like, I was consistent. I could jump pretty well. And, I had big jumps in me, but it was like training and all that is just so much different when you're at a college. Your schedule's laid out, you got a place to train, you've got coaches there, you got a great weight room, great support staff. If I rolled my ankle or did anything like that, go right to the training room. Those guys were great. When you're on your own, all that goes away. Unless I wanted to live at UCLA when I was done with the school, I wouldn't have had access to stuff like that. And I didn't, I moved away. I'm on my own. I remember one time I rolled my ankle and I'm like, I'm at home, putting ice cubes in a bag, trying to, and when I was at UCLA, I would have hopped into the training room and stuck my foot in the ice whirlpool, so it was like, it's a whole different world. And I forget where my brain was going with that because I got lost in the details. I do that from time to time, but just going along, doing what you're doing and seeing the levels and all that, back and forth here, states, whatever. How do you find talent? How does it get trained? It's so complex. There's, like you talked about, politics, and we talk about this all the time here, money and the popularity of track and field. It doesn't seem to me to be as high as it once was. And everybody goes, yeah, but you're crazy. Look at the Olympics. I'm like, well, the Olympics is once every 4 years, in between, kind of a waste. I was talking about, I remember now, I was talking about my personal journey. So the reason I went down that road and I got sidetracked was I didn't understand what under 20 was and all that, because it was, talking with young athletes like yourself from all the other countries. I've talked with, I've followed Nicole Romani, from Italy, love watching her jump. I've seen her at under 18, now under 20. She's jumping 187 or 188 now. She looks great. I've seen, talking with athletes like you, with Abraham, Vogelsang, decathlete from Norway. Just had Fabian Delrid, from Sweden. He's jumped like, he's a beast. That kid, he's jumping 7'7" 3/4, right? He's like 6'9". We just did a post on him where he gave me his development from like 14, boom, boom, boom. But so I was totally unfamiliar with this whole under 14, under 16. I don't know what they all start at. Is it under 16, under 16, under 20, 18, under 20?
In Europe, in Europe they do, I think, under 16, under 18, under 20, and then they do that. I don't know what they do after that. But in the UK, we love to be weird. We do under 15, under 17, under 20, and then under 23s. because we technically see a 23-year-old as that's meant to be your senior year.
Hmm.
Because I don't know if it was worked out on like biometrics or whatever, but most people are out of university or college in the UK at 21 to 23, depending on if they do an undergraduate with a master's, or an undergraduate with a, and then some undergraduates are 5 years long. So some people are just in university until they are 23. So I guess that's why we have a slightly longer system before
Right.
you're out of college or school. So,
That sounds
so
about right. It's almost the
yeah.
same. Then you're done with college, and then you're kind of on your own, right? You're either going to be,
Well,
you're elite. You're gonna
exactly
find
that.
someone to coach you and do all that, right? Yeah.
So the the snapshot that you just gave me of basically what it was like for you when you left university and you left UCLA, that's UK athletics. If you have, yeah, that's every international athlete we've got in the UK. You have to build your own setup. So I jump at knots. My weights room's in Derby, which is a town not too far from Nottingham. Um, and my weight setup is in Derby because that's where one of the good coaches are. My high jumping indoor setup is at Loughborough, which is near Leicester, and that's another town that's further down the road. Uh, and if you are not able to find, I mean, England's a smaller place, which helps, and we've got probably a lot of quality in a smaller place than
Hmm.
how sparsely populated your good high jumping centers or are in America.
Right.
But, in the UK, if you can't build your setup yourself, no one's going to do it for you. Like, I haven't really spoke about it much on this podcast, but I spoke to you a little bit about it in person. Like, I was really, really ill the last couple of years to the point where like high jump nearly physically wasn't going to be a possibility, and nobody cared. Like, none. If I had a sponsor, if I had a university, like my university only care about me because I do well for them, and I almost understand that because in the UK there's even less money in
Hmm.
athletics. I do well for them, so they care for me. And it's like this year is the first year where my results have been good enough, and I've been doing well enough at competitions, very specific competitions, hitting criteria, where I can then get some sort of funding, and I do get like it sounds a little bit more like I would have loved to have seen what the UCLA setup would have been like, but I will now have access to everything more centralized to me.
Hmm.
But in the UK, you've got to be that top 2%, maybe even top 1% to get anywhere near that level of funding that some of the top. I mean, I looked at coming to America just for that reason of there are probably 100 colleges in America that are better than the best UK setup we've got.
Really.
And it really does break it down to in the UK, if we've got a high jumper coming through that's like you probably know Joel Kahn, he's probably our best high jumper at the moment, or Tom
Hmm.
Gale. That's because they've had fantastic coaches from the age of 13, 14. You think about who their coaches are and how well they've and how traveled they are and the kind of the training that they've had to do. In the UK, if we get an elite high jumper, they're going to be consistent for when they do make it. Because I do feel like sometimes I look at the American high jumpers and think like, God, like you see them indoors and someone will jump 233 or 234, even 235, and you'll think these people are going to absolutely destroy the world champs. And then they come to Europe sometimes, and it's a bit of a joke, almost like, oh well, an American high jumper he might look amazing in America, but can he almost do it in Europe, kind of
Right.
thing.
Right.
I almost think that I look at my mate when he pole vaults and he does all of his personal bests when he's in America, and he's so heavily like supported in that bubble at his college. And I often think maybe there's a reason why some of the UK athletes, when we do make it through and we do get to the top level, have a little bit of grit about us. Like some of our 1500-meter runners and our 800-meter runners right now. The reason why we're so good is just because there's so many lads at the similar age who are just pushing each other.
Yeah.
And it almost feels like we've probably got that for the first time in a couple of events. We've got that almost university or college-like feel where
Hmm.
there's 10 lads in that spot. And it's like no wonder the first time the UK gets 10 or 11 good lads who are all wanting to run those times, and then we get both of the lads have beaten Ingebrigtsen over the 1500, and we got a medal in the 800 for the first time for 30 years. So
Wow.
it's an interesting that I always feel like if I was to go to America, it's not a level of softness, but your facilities are so good. And I always feel like there's something gritty that if you make it in the UK, wow, like almost like everything's stacked against you because we don't
Yeah.
really have this. We've got setups, but they only kind of work if you're already at that level.
Right.
Like
Right.
I think it would work so much better. Let's say one of your top American athletes came over to the UK and worked with a UK coach. Well, they do wonders. They'd still do exactly the same as they do in America, but they look like they're doing amazing. But I reckon if you were a younger American athlete, and this is just why no young American athletes really probably come over to England for sport. Yeah, would you say the transfers more the other way? You know, like a lot of English
Yeah.
youngsters travel to
Well, like
America
you said, in
for
college
funding.
here, we're always looking for the foreign athletes because again, you're talking about money over here. When you get football, basketball, especially over here, they basketball has grown internationally bigger than football as far as that goes. When basketball
Yeah,
left the US, it really went worldwide. And some of the best players in the NBA over here are foreign born.
yeah,
Nikola, the guy that won the MVP this year, foreign born player. The
yeah,
Mavs. I'm forgetting all these names, but guys in the past like Dirk Nowitzki and some of these great athletes have the NBA is outstanding at finding you. If you're good, they'll bring you over,
yeah. And you want to work hard.
and
Yeah.
track and field, I've talked with Sue Humphrey on here. She coached, Charles Austin when he won the Olympics in
Nice,
96,
nice.
jumps, 7, 10 and a half. She was kind of saying, it's just the way the system's rigged, but the history at UCLA, one of our best decathletes ever was Rayford Johnson, who just passed away a couple of years ago. He won the gold in 60, I believe, and his teammate was CK Yang, who was Japanese.
Yeah,
So we had, the number one and number two. They went 1-2 at the NC2As over here, and then they went 1-2 in the Olympics. And then you've got one from the US and one from, Japan on the same track team. So it's
yeah,
like that was crazy, but that's been very commonplace. The UCLA basketball team this year, I think, has at least 5 foreign born players. So we're outstanding at finding talent and bringing them over here because it's big money. I mean, UCLA basketball, they won 11 national titles. They're like, they expect to be like we expect them to be. I'm an alumni. I'm like, if our basketball team sucks, they're calling for the coach's head. There's like,
yeah,
got to
yeah,
run this
yeah.
guy out on a rail, man. We do not win the Pac-12s. We do not get to the NC2A tournament and go out in the first round. We should be playing for the championship every year. That's the way the mindset
Yeah,
is. And, over here, March Madness, we call it for basketball, is just unbelievable money. It's stupid. The networks get just billions of dollar contracts. And so that money all flows downhill. And unfortunately, it only goes through football and basketball, but money doesn't seem to end up in track, but they'll still find them. Like I said, I mentioned Rosie Sharples last year. She was a 18-year-old high jumper. She was over at, I think she was at Mississippi State.
Mm,
And I haven't had a chance to chat with her since and find out how her first year went over here. She was both a high jumper and a heptathlete. But Sue mentioned that a lot of the foreign born athletes come over here and they get outstanding training and then they go back and they dominate, so it's, like you're saying, but I also have seen the flip like you're talking about because Instagram's been my big eye opener. It's how you and I are talking now. It's been a 5 or 6 year journey. Like I said, I went through my desert period where I was coaching track and football, but I wasn't really trying to pursue to the level I might have if I had said, I really need to do this for a living. I didn't make that jump. Like I said, I tried to be a great athlete and go to the Olympics for a living, and that didn't work out. And then I just got quote unquote a job, being a teacher. And then coaching is something that I enjoyed, but I never really pursued as a career. Now I'm kind of like seeing it as my second career. And this is something that I am passionate about and all that. So, now I've gotten to this place of, oh yeah, there's this whole other world again. Like I didn't know who any of these people were. And, but I'm looking on Instagram and I get this guy sends me a thing from India, like you're talking about, right? I get videos of people jumping from India barefooted in the dirt, jumping over sticks, two guys
Homemade pit.
holding up a
Made.
stick, two guys
Yeah,
holding
homemade.
up a stick so a guy can run and jump over it, landing in the dirt. And you're like, I'm watching it going, wow, these guys really love, this competition. They're just getting after it. One guy sent me a video of him jumping over an ox, running up on a straight line and jumping over an ox and landing on the far side. And my first thought was, okay, that's a terrible angle. And my second thought was, what? He just jumped over an ox. Like,
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
didn't
yeah,
get
yeah.
down the bar angle that I wanted, but I'm like, that guy just jumped over a cow. So
Yeah, that's crazy.
so you talk about tough, and gritty. It's like, yeah, how do you train, for that when you don't really have a place, like when they get to a place where they get to land on a pit, they got to be, ecstatic. And
Yeah,
I've seen, like you're saying, it looks like somebody piled 4 mattresses, on the other
yeah,
side, and they're jumping into that, I'm like, man, we
yeah.
have it. You're
Did you
right.
see,
You're probably too pampered.
was it Cali, the World Juniors recently, and there was a Kenyan female. She would have been about 5'7" tall, and she runs in a straight line at the bar and does like a like with her legs, like almost basically a hurdle, but like sideways, and it was almost like a flashback to like the straddle in a straight line, and she's clearing like 165, and she's at like the World Juniors,
Yeah.
and I'm like, I remember seeing it on TV thinking like it might have been actually Nairobi. That makes more sense with a Kenyan
Right.
athlete in the last World Juniors. I remember watching it on whatever I was watching it on my phone or my laptop and thinking like, wow, like my first thought a couple of years ago would have been like, how good could she be if she had the right technique?
Right.
But then all of a sudden it was like she thinking like just how good is she full stop? Like I think she cleared like I think she ended up clearing like 173 at the World Under 18s or Under 20s, and she was basically at this point like basically running up to it and kicking the bar
Yeah.
and shimmying over the second hand side, and it was yeah, it's just there is maybe an argument, and this sort of comes back all the way back around to that point we made at the beginning, like what was she doing as a youngster, and potentially like there's stuff to learn, I guess, like in adversity, like almost like we have it's not really a saying in the UK, but like a lot of people do say it, like pressure can make
Uh-huh.
diamonds.
Oh yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so so it's like that.
I love I like the competition, and I know that the big question, of course, is always, you get people involved in it, coaches and trainers and all that, and when you get to the money part, like over here, club sports is really big, and especially in both football and basketball, and soccer, club soccer, club volleyball are big over here, but top end over here in the U.S. still people are growing to learn about soccer, but it's still not our
Mm.
nation's pastime for sure. Like baseball, basketball, football are all bigger over here, but soccer's on the come as far as the Americans go. But it's like you know even at the high schools and everything, like nobody knows who the soccer players are at our high school, but everybody would know the football players and basketball players for sure.
Yeah.
So it's like the money flow, and where they get, how they go, and get from place to place. But what was the other thing that popped into my head? You were talking about this development, the pressure. That was it, getting them younger. God, I'm having senior moments today, right and left. Getting them younger and younger. There was a time back 20 years ago now, I remember, when the Russians were doing gymnastics, and they show this little pixie come out, and she looks like she's 4'9", and she's got to be 90 pounds, maybe. And
Yeah.
just running down, everything perfectly, technically beautiful, just perfect technique, bam. And you're like,
Yeah.
and they go, yeah, she's Tanya, Romanovsky, and she's 19, and I'm like, no. That is not a 19-year-old. That is incorrect.
Yeah.
That can't be. 19-year-old girls do not look like they're 8. I'm like, and there was actually a controversy at the time. They're thinking, did the Russians come up with some way to do a drug suppression thing where they were keeping them younger, or because the Russians are famous for
Yeah,
all of it.
yeah, yeah,
Let's be straight up. They're taking steroids like they're coming at us, going out of style, and just they run everybody through the mill, and they don't care how many break, because the ones that get through, like you said, that they get through this crucible of pressure, and they come out on the other end, and they're just awesome. You just go, oh well, they're all like that. It's like, no, they destroyed about 80 of them, 80 out of 100. The 20 that make it are pretty good. So the idea that I always got was pressure, man, the cream rising to the top and all that. That's true. You want to get them. And I tell the kids over here, even especially the girls, like you said, at 14, sometimes they seem better at 14 sometimes than they get to be at 16 or 18. So you're like, get them young and get them used to jumping over stuff high, and let's go, because you don't know how long that window is. And the other end is, I think the younger you are, the more adaptable you are. I mean, look at how you picked up karate and you were doing your jumping, and I mean, there's all kinds of stories out there, and I'm always jealous when I hear about someone who's, oh, they do this and they do that and they do all these different sports and they speak 5 languages, and I'm just like going, God, what a talentless toad I must be. I can do like 1 or 2 things, and I speak 1 language, and that's it. I haven't learned. I've taken 3 years of high school Spanish, and I still, if someone's talking Spanish to me, and I'm in California, there's a lot of Spanish speakers, and I pick up an occasional word. I'm like, oh yeah, trabajo, that means work, right? Okay. And I can kind of figure out what they were talking about in a very general sense, but I mean, I've never assimilated. So I'm like, but the younger you are when you start doing stuff and you ask your brain to absorb, I think it's just like, you're like a sponge. They really can pick up a lot of things. And pressure, especially maybe if you don't come at them like, okay, here's all this pressure, but you just put them in the big meets, and let them find their way, without maybe doing the overbearing pressure on them. But since they're good enough and they can get to those big meets, why not let them compete,
Yeah, so I think my coach and the way that my coaching style, because sometimes this year my coach would have to go away to coach some other athletes at Loughborough. Like some of the athletes that we had in our group this year, their PBs were 222 and 215. So sometimes I'd stay back in Nottingham and do some coaching with the youngsters, and they'd go and try and get their preparation correct for some of the bigger competitions. That's kind of what I'm aiming for this following season. So the athletes quite learned pretty quickly that, okay, my coach Adam or my other coach called Harry have kind of 2 different training styles. And obviously I'm much younger in comparison to my coach, but I don't let them slack, and I'm pretty harsh to the point where like sometimes they're like, yeah, they're 14 years old, but they've been jumping for 3, 4, 5 months consecutively. And if they're doing stuff that I know that they shouldn't, I'll literally be like, come on, you know how to do this. You're much better than you're performing right now. And then you see that almost like, I think maybe because I still look young and I'm in education and I am young at 21 years old. I know I'm young, but I feel it as well. And I almost feel like that moment you just mentioned about when you're young and you're almost like moldable or like a sponge. I almost feel like if you can try and keep your mindset open and try and be as like, I'm trying to learn as much things as I can right now, educationally, and then obviously academically as well as athletics. But you can see if you can almost like tap into that like self-defense side of them when they get a little bit like tetchy, if you can say, come on, you're better than this, and they go, and then you see them react, and then all of a sudden it's like, there's the emotion. We had a really good coach in the UK. Long story short, he's not a coach at the moment, but he might come back soon for many reasons. But he used to say that our emotions are controlled by the breath. So therefore, breathing controls emotion, and emotion controls motion. So therefore, breathing is your motion. And if you can get someone slightly just on edge, but the right kind of on edge, where they kind of pick up a little bit of that adrenaline because you're telling them, look, you're not doing it right, like get to work kind of thing. And then all of a sudden I think there's and what's crazy is I've seen enough athletes now that once you've seen maybe 100 athletes, there's probably only about 6 or 7 different jumpers in the world. That's what I always think. There's probably about 7 different styles. And it's like, okay, they are slightly more erratic, or there's like a big spectrum of, but there's probably only about 7 or 8 different methods that really truly work.
Hmm.
And someone is eventually in one of those. They're either a power jumper or a speed jumper, and you can see that. I can see that right when if I took a complete brand new pool of 10-year-old kids.
Right.
If you've seen them high jump, you can see that sort of like starting to develop, and it's almost like I know different things will work for different athletes, and I think maybe that's something that could be also like looked at as well. I think that's quite interesting how you say like with the Russians they'd break 80 of them, where you don't have that luxury anymore. Neither should you almost, because
Right. Right.
it's not great. But we also used to say in the UK, there was another coach who used to say, don't ever compare yourself to the Russians because they have a completely different breakfast to you. So
Yeah.
and that was kind of like the just, and this was back when a lot of Russians actively competed. He'd be like, well, he'd joke about and he'd say like, okay, let's say there's another coach who I knew, and he'd be like, okay, oh yeah, Britain got a gold and a silver there. Let's say we actually got 5th and 6th. And he'd be like, well, that person's this and this, and he'd work it all the way through the list, and he'd basically always make out that in Britain we don't like we're a clean one. But yeah, it's that kind of like that thought process. Yeah, that's just another thought that I had that linked back to what you were saying earlier.
Yeah. Well, we're talking about so many variables. The development of young athletes. I've been fascinated these last few years. I wish I had. I feel like, I don't know if you know who Bill Murray is, the actor. They did a movie over here called Groundhog Day, but he was stuck in a time loop where the day kept repeating over and over, and he didn't know how to get out of the day. And there's speculation amongst the producers and everything else and the script writers that what's implied is that he was stuck in this time loop for over 33,000 days, because he goes through these phases where when he first finds out that his day is repeating, he freaks out, which I think anybody would. So the way it's written kind of makes sense to me, because he's like, oh my God, what is this? I get up. When I wake up, it's the exact same day. Like he gets up and his alarm turns on. It's the same song, the same guys talking through the same part of some radio show. And he's got it memorized within a couple days, and then it's like, he gets out of his bed, goes walking down the hallway, and the same person hits him at the top of the stairs and goes, good morning. You going to see the groundhog? And he's like, didn't we do that yesterday? And it was like, and now that thing, it just keeps spilling out. But he goes through panic, then he goes through adjustment, and then he's like, hey, if every day is the same, I can do whatever I want. So he goes through a very hedonistic phase where he indulges in every fantasy that he can do. And then he goes, that didn't bring him happiness, and it didn't end the cycle. And then he goes all the way through. Then he decides there's no point. He's going to kill himself. So he successfully kills himself over and over and keeps waking up the next morning without a dent in the fender. So he literally says, I think I'm a god. He's like, I kill myself every day and I keep waking up, and I keep starting over. So he goes, I'm immortal. And then he's like, this one girl's, the date that he's looking at, she's like, I went to 12 years of Catholic school. You're not a god. And she's like, so then he's like, well, what am I here for? And she goes, well, maybe, I don't know, maybe, you're here to learn something. Or she goes, sometimes I wish I had 1,000 lifetimes, maybe I could study this or I could do that. And he's like, well, that's a different way to look at it, And so then he starts trying to improve himself, and that's where the movie takes a turn. But it's like, I think about that sometimes. If I had all the time that I want to do right now, I would literally, part of me wants to write the high jumping manual from A to Z. And the other part of me wants to get on a very specific subject of how we learn, because man, when you start teaching a skill and you watch somebody who's ingrained into one thing, it's like, if I go, I need you to do this. I need you to drive your knee up as high as you can, and then leave it up until it gets to the bar level. You find all kinds of different people who can do that. Some people do it right away. And then some people, because they've gotten used to immediately going into their layout, they can't unchange it. I'm just like, I've had some athletes come to me that really had a nice, perfect, position in the air, but the bar was low and they would just barely get the knee drive going. And then wham, they pop the hip and they throw their head back and everything looks wonderful. And I'm like, God, your layout's really good. And I've broken things down. My 5 phases, straight, curve, takeoff, flight, layout. Boom. I go, these happen in sequence. They need to be spaced in between. I go, you cannot be in layout as you're still taking off. I go, you can at low levels, but when the bar gets higher and higher, you cannot blend your layout into your takeoff. There has to be a little flight time. You know, there's got to be, watch Barshim when he's jumping 711. He drives his knee up and he waits for quite a while
Yeah.
to where he gets up to where he's starting to level out. And then he'll figure out when he wants to lay out. It's not an immediate thing. So anyway, I've been watching and having various levels of success and not success because of really sometimes just the fact that you've gotten somebody, and sometimes I think it can happen as fast as 5 or 10 jumps, even without a coach, because you figure once somebody has success doing one thing, they run up and they jump and they make the bar and everybody goes, hey, right? And they go, okay. Part of your brain immediately being a supercomputer and knowing everything about everything, the brain just goes, oh, I took off from here. I was traveling at this speed and I did this. And that resulted in success. Some people's brains work. Somebody else might run up and do something completely different the second time because they're not really that talented or, you know, whatever. They don't even think about it. They're not trying that hard, whatever. But man, once you get them, even after they've been to somebody else or, you know, they've been jumping for a year and it's just like, wow, this one habit is like, it's heck to get rid of, you know? Yeah, it's ingrained. So it's like, I'm interested in A, how you learn and B, how you unlearn, because man, there's a tremendous amount of programming. I'm into walkthroughs, I'm into visualization, I'm into, you can't do it fast until you can do it slow, which is why I think dance and ballet and even like almost Tai Chi, you know, walking through certain sequences really, really slow, perfect technique. I'm like, if you can't do it perfect when we're walking it, there's no way you're going to do it when you run fast, you know? So, well, hey, Harry, I'm going to let you go. I know it's getting late there. I appreciate your time. We're well over the hour. I told you we'd go. I'm sure we could talk for another hour or so. I really appreciate your time and I wish you the best. Please keep me in the loop as you're climbing up. I wanted to say, those of you that are listening out there to the Raise the Bar podcast, I'm here with Harry Lewis, going by his middle name, Harry Wiley. I hadn't seen Wiley until today. So he has jumped 204 is your best, right? The last you showed me, you took jumps at 207 and 211, which I found interesting. I didn't ask you the details, but I also noticed that they were very good jumps. And it looks like you're knocking on the door to some higher heights here quickly. So please keep us in the loop, send the PR videos and we're going to promote the heck out of you.
Thank you. Cheers.
Hey, very good. Thank you, sir. We'll talk again soon.
Yeah. See you soon, man.
All right. Bye.
Bye.
And that's going to wrap it up for us today on Raise the Bar. This was Sunday, August 17th or September 17th. I've already lost a month. And we talked with Harry Lewis from across the pond in England. He's a 21-year-old with a personal best of 2.04. He's still going to school there in England, does a little bit of coaching and is still competing. Last meet I saw him, he sent me videos of him attempting both 207 and 211, which we didn't go into great detail on, but they were close jumps. So he's got a lot more in him. I expect to see a couple of personal best video posts coming up here sometime soon, and we'll be keeping a close eye on him. So until next time, remember here on Raise the Bar, remember to keep raising that bar yourself in your personal and your sports life in every aspect. And we will be looking forward to talking with you in about a week. Until then, it's Troy Haynes signing off.